Alright, so the first video I just didn't press record, so this is gonna be a second time. This video should be around 40 minutes, and it's gonna show you like the basics of how to make a combat system. And that's pretty much it. I'm also gonna show you how Roblox works in general, how RoBloX Studio works, and how it's sort of an object-oriented type of compiler type of system. So yeah. So first things first, let's look at the starter character. So if we play the game, we'll notice that workspace, which is the whole thing over here, has an object called me. This is your character. If you open your character, these are all the children of that character. Vice versa, the children, this is the parent of the child. So human repart is a child of my character. So another thing we want to note is starter character scripts. Anything, and I mean anything, that you put in here is going to be replicated to your character. So let's make a folder called core, right? This is going to be for organization type of preferences. So if you play the game, you'll notice that your character automatically has a folder called core. So you might be thinking, okay, there's something called starter player scripts here too. So yes, it does the same exact thing. If we add a folder here called starter player scripts, or no, I'm not gonna name it that, something like that, play the game. If you look at your player, you open player scripts, you'll see a folder in there called whatever brain rot that is. So let's get started with the actual scripting portion. We'll call this inputs. You can call this whatever you want. So let's first thing I want to note for y'all is comments. 2 dashes equals a comment, so you can write whatever you want here, but you can't do it once you enter a new line. In order to do that, we want 2 dashes and the little letter beside the P. So we want to do that twice, 1, 2, and then you can press enter. Anything within this little white space here you can type, so you can do test, 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 doesn't matter. It's useful for commenting for other people and yourself to know just how the script works in general, what function does what. So let's call this core input client. Now, the first thing I want to emphasize for y'all is the supreme usefulness of documentation. So you'll notice that for pretty much every comment system, well, a good one, you can hold your left mouse button to be able to punch. So to do that, we'll use something called run service. Right here. So one thing I want y'all to note too is the difference between events and properties. Events and methods. So events will always have a period following their calling, and methods will always have the 2 double dots. So let's define your variable called run service, and let's look at the events called render stepped. So you'll see that it gives you a little description of it. Fires every frame prior to the frame being rendered. So this is good because now we can actually detect continuously if the player is holding your left mouse button. So we can say run service dot, which is an event, render stepped. After every event, it's going to be muscle memory once you do it for like a while, but you always have a connect function, open parentheses, and whatever like the arguments that the default Roblox function has for you, which in this case we call delta time. It does not need to be called this. You can call it DT, AB, some brain rot, but in this case we'll just do delta time. And another thing we can note is annotations. So this tells Roblox that this type of argument is a number. You can call this is a string, is a boolean, but in this case it's going to be a number. So now we want to also look at a service called UserInputService. Every single game ever uses input service. So if we look at a method and we scroll down, called is mouse button pressed. It conveniently has a way for you to check if your mouse button is pressed, and it returns whatever, doesn't matter. The documentation has it all for you. So we can say we have to define the service first, like so. And then we can say if UserInputService is mouse button pressed, a method once again, so it needs double dots, enum.UserInputType to mouse button 1. Even if you don't know what enums are, UserInput types are, the documentation tells you. It tells you exactly what enums are, default values, etc, etc, etc. So we can say this, and we can say print. Obviously, you should know what prints are. So prints clients left click. So we play the game, and if we left click or hold down left click, we can see that it prints it out. And if I let go, it stops printing. All from what? 4 lines. So I don't know why games don't know how to do it. It's deadass just 4 lines, bro. Let's see if it's still recording. Yep. So the next thing we want is 2 notes, replicated storage, and all of these folders I have in here. Once again, organization purposes, preferences, doesn't really matter. But we will reference remotes, like so. And in doing so, I'm going to show y'all what the difference is between WaitForChild and FindFirstChild. The main difference is WaitForChild yields the script, and FindFirstChild immediately attempts to find the argument passed, which is a string. So, what yielding does, right? And why it's so crucial is if you do workspace WaitForChild blah blah blah, everything beneath this will not run. So WaitForChild is used in the assumption that the child that you're trying to find is going to be added sometime or another. But the default cutout time is around 5 seconds, I think. 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. So if I do play, and I hold left click, you'll see that it doesn't work. And an infinite yield should pop up. There you go. So you see infinite yield possible because it just wasn't there. So yeah. Now, knowing that, we will do local replicated storage, game get service, because we want a way for the client to communicate with the server, saying that, okay, I want to attack. So we'll say local remotes equals replicated storage WaitForChild remotes. The reason we do this is because the client doesn't load all of these right away. For every new client that's added, it needs to load every single thing in replicated storage. So if you do .remotes, it will error occasionally depending on your ping. So to be safe, we'll do WaitForChild remotes. So now we'll make a new remote event called attack. So I don't know if you've gotten far in the YouTube videos yet, but what remote events do is they let you communicate from the client to the server. So we'll say remotes.attack fire server, like so. And once again, if you don't know what remote events are, conveniently we have something called remote event. So you have methods, which once again double dots. Events, once again, are single dots. Now, let me get some water. Now we're gonna make a script in the systems. Once again, organization preferences. We'll call this comment system. Now, comments just for me, and then we'll say local replicated storage, because we want to reference the remotes folder. So we'll get service, and then we'll say local remotes equals replicated storage.remotes. So the reason we do that is because it's just for pure looks, man. Pure organization, because this looks ugly compared to this. So once again, not once again, but the reason we can do .remotes instead of WaitForChild or FindFirstChild is because of the server. The server instantly loads everything in the game. So it instantly loads all of this, just everything. So because of that, we can do .remotes without it erroring. Now, remotes.attack .onServerEvent, which is a method. And they even have open documentation for you. But onServerEvent fires a script when fire server is called on the same remote event from a local script. I can't lie, they did not have that before. But that's really good. And it tells you what the parameters it is. So these are automatically going to be present once you define the events or initiate it. So to onServerEvent connect function, remember muscle memory, always a connect function, open parentheses. And you see that we have your little arguments in here. So player, because we want it to be known as a player so we can access the properties for it. So yeah, let's say this. Alright. Let's just add this back in. Another thing, you see that we have something called tuple, right? Anything after your initiation of the player, you can add anything you want. You can add test, test arg, test arg2. However, this is frowned upon and most old games do this for some reason. But the meta is you want to have a table in here called argument data. This is anything after the player. So if we do that, we can fire server. So a common mistake people make is that they say, okay, if the player is in here, that means we have to do the player in here, right? No. The player is only a server thing, right? It tells the server that which client fires this. So we don't need to add player in here. But what we can add is add everything after the player, which is argument data. So we can, for example, it could be like holding space equals true, test1 equals true, test2 equals true. So, but in this case, we'll just make it an empty table for now. And there we go. So, we're going to check for the character. Local character equals player.character. The reason we do this is, okay, what if the character is not there? That's going to be a problem. So we're just checking if there's a character. So if character, then we can check for the humanoid, right? Because humanoid is always going to be there if the player is there. So we want to make sure that the humanoid is actually there and like someone didn't mess with it and destroy it or anything. Character, FindFirstChild, humanoid. Right? So you'll see that, let's see, let's go over here. Humanoid. Alright, you see all of these properties and etc. for the humanoid, right? Typically Roblox autofills it for you, but you see that it doesn't have all the functions for it, like camera offset and stuff. So the way you can do that is through annotating. So we can 2 dots, and you see that it automatically autofills it for you. You can say humanoid. And I give the model, yep, so humanoid like that, and now we can say humanoid at camera offset or anything we want. That's a property of the normal humanoid. But now, once we do that, we can say print player.name ... attack. So one thing I want to go through with y'all is how concatenating works and how combining strings works, especially in print statements. So in a print statement, you can do print whatever you want, add a comma, attack, test1, test2. For every comma that's added, that means another space. So that's like saying attack, space, test1, space, test2. Right? So if we play the game and we hold, you'll see that, okay, it's a comma after every single thing. So that's how one way of printing works, through commas. Another way is through ... 2 dots. So you have to make a new string, So dot 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 doesn't automatically add a space between your strings, so you have to add a space and then attack. Typically for me, I like to do this just because I'm used to it, but comma is definitely more preferred throughout a lot of people. So up here we can say if humanoid then. So if we found the humanoid, then we can say player.name attack. So there we go, attack. One major issue that you could see is it's spamming the server with attacks or attack prints, and we don't want that. So one thing we can do is add a debounce or a buffer. So we can do that by saying if character FindFirstChild attacking. So if the character finds an instance called attacking, then we want to stop it from printing. Now you might be wondering, okay, attacking, you're gonna have to add something called attacking in the player for this to work. So let's make a new instance called attacking equals instance.new folder. This can be anything you want. This can be a bool value, an int value, a number value. It doesn't matter. But in this case, I'm just gonna do folder for just my preference. And now we can say, let's go to search instance new. My faults. Let's do instance. Here we go. There we go. Methods. Let's go over here, scroll down a little bit. Here we go. Right here, object replication. This is how you make new instances. So you see instance.new part, you parent it, etc, etc. So let's go back to here. Attacking.name. So we know that a property of a folder, which you can find in the documentation, a property inherited from instance. So we go back to instance, wait for it to load. You see that a property of whatever is name. So we can call the folder attacking, and we can parent the folder to the character, which is what the script is looking for, right? So the main thing people need to wrap their head around is the difference between variable names and the actual name of the instance that they're creating, right? So we can call this A as the brain rot right here. This doesn't affect the name of this. Vice versa, if we call this blah blah blah, this script wouldn't work anymore because we're trying to find the instance called attacking, not blah blah blah. So let's change this back to attacking, and then let's play the game. You'll see one major issue with this. It doesn't work anymore after you attack once. See? The reason for this is we didn't destroy the attacking folder. So let's take a look at another service called debris service. Okay. Let me reload the page so it loads faster. So now we can go to methods. Once again, remember methods have double dots, events have single dots. So we go to method add item. Once again, basically what Atom does is that it destroys an instance after a certain amount of time. And it tells you what the parameters are, which is convenient too. So we can say, well, first off, we have to make the service. So local debris equals game get service debris. Now we can say debris add item attacking, which is your item instance, comma, let's say 0.5 seconds. Okay. Now, this is going to add a buffer or a cooldown to how many times you can attack. So every 0.5 seconds you can attack again, is what this is saying. Excuse me. Now, if you hold left mouse button, you can see that it has a little buffer and it waits a little bit before you attack. Now that's good and all, but now let's go ahead and start with Hitbox. Oh, also another thing, scoping, a huge thing that you have to wrap your head around. How ROBLOX reads is from top to bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way like that. It reads in a sequential order. So with that in mind, if we were to delete the debris add item, right, and put it up here, this would not work because the attacking instance hasn't been created yet, according to the script. Even though, if you look at it from face value, you'll see that it has been created. But Roblox reads from top to bottom. So you need to put this below the part where you instance the attacking folder. Like so. Now, hitboxes. Let's go ahead and make a hitbox, and let me show you how the Roblox part thing works. Let me add a new character, like so. Alright, this is our character that we can base the hitbox from. Insert a part. Let me position the part to where the character is. There we go. Now, one major thing that you have to know is if you hold control and you expand or move your mouse back and forth, it expands on both axes. So let's say we want it to go up a little bit, we want it to go forward. I'm not holding control now, so if I hold this out, it's just gonna move it like this. Rather, if I hold control now, I push this out, it's gonna go both ways. But I wanna move this out a little bit. I want it to be directly in front of the character, and I want it to expand out like so. Make it up like this, and we can call this the hitbox templates. Okay, now, an important thing you have to know for everything, right, is how these properties work: CanCollide, anchored, and massless. If CanCollide is set to true, then you can collide with it. If it's not, then you can't. But in this case, hitboxes, we don't want it to collide with the character, as in we don't want them to physically touch it and be bounced or repulsed back. So, we also want massless to be true. What massless does, if it's false, is that it adds sort of like a weight to the character. Basically physics, right? Because you see over here you have a mass of 54.62, whatever Roblox units are. But if massless is set to false, then the part is gonna add an extra type of mass to the character, and we don't want that. We want the hitbox purely to be there just for hitbox detection. So we turn these off, and up here, self-explanatory, you can change this to 0.75. Transparency, everyone and their mom should know what that means, and brick color. So this is our little hitbox, like so. And we can drag this to ReplicatedStorage. Oops, there we go. So, if I didn't mention this before, what ReplicatedStorage is and why it's so important is that everything that you want both the server and client to see, you put in ReplicatedStorage. Because the client can access anything ReplicatedStorage as seen here, and same with the server. So, with that in mind, let's make a new variable called ReplicatedStorage.assets. And now we can actually get the hitbox template from that. So, we can say local hitbox clone equals assets.hitboxTemplates clone. So once again, if you don't know what clone does, we can go to the instance class, like so. And now we can scroll down until we see clone, which should be right here. And it tells you exactly what clone does. And now, let's go back. Let's call the hitbox clone. Let's name it, right? Hitbox. Because we don't want to just call it template. It's kind of weird. And once again, name. That's how you know that's a valid property. Now, we can parent it to the workspace. There's already a folder here from before, but let's parent it to workspace hitboxes. Now, if y'all haven't seen welding in like the YouTube tutorials yet, I'm gonna give you like a sort of brief run through what that is, right? So local weld equals instance.new weld. Now we can say weld.part0, so which is the first base part that the joint connects to. So we want to weld the character's humanoid root part, right? So the character humanoid root part is this, the thing that this updates every time the player moves. It essentially glues all of these parts together, right? So, let's get rid of that. We want to weld the character human root part to the hitbox clone. Also, we want to parent the weld. Always remember to parent, because if you don't, then it's not going to work. So there we go, and that should work. So let's do this. Oh shoot. Also, I forgot to destroy the hitbox. So we'll say debris add item hitbox clone, 0.5. Or no, 0.35. We want a little sort of delay in between. So if we attack, you'll see that the hitbox is in there. Yep. However, you see that it's not offset correctly. That brings me to my second point, which is how to offset in Roblox. So if we click on the human root part, click on move, you can see sort of the axes of how the character moves. So general rule of thumb is x-axis moves left to right, y up and down, and z forward and back. So we can say weld.co, let's see, go down here, the offset point. So equals cframe.new, 0, 0, because you see x, y. However, we want the z to be sort of in the front a little bit. So we can say -3. So we play the game. You'll see that the hitbox is in front of the player a little bit, like so. So another thing we want to mention, what I'm going to show you, is what happens if CanCollide is on. Let me turn this off real quick and hit and go to the dummy. You see that there's no collision happening. However, if I go over here, turn this on, and start walking up to the dummy, yep, we do not want that. This is stupid and shouldn't be a thing. So yeah, turn this off. Now, the actual hitbox detecting. Let's go to, let me see if I'm still recording. Yep. So, we want to create a new thread. Right? Threading. So, let me go a brief overview of what task is and what threads are. Excuse me. So, what threading is that it creates a sort of new parallel where different functions, different scripts can run simultaneously at the same time. So let's say this, right? We have two threads. That means this runs in a different parallel as this one. So if we were to say workspace, WaitForChild, which I mentioned before, if we do this and it's not there, it's going to yield, right? So blah, blah, blah. But if in here we print, this ignores the WaitForChild. This is going to print anyways, even though it should wait for this. But because it's in a different thread or parallel, it doesn't. So if we attack, you'll see that this ignores WaitForChild. However, wait, you'll see that there is a infinite yield. This is because even though you've already made a new thread, errors can occur within that thread. This is important for understanding how memory leaks work and things like that, because people usually just spam test.spawn if they want things to run the same thing at once, but they don't disconnect functions. So always remember to disconnect your things and things like that. But knowing that, let's do the hitbox detection. So while true, or while hitbox clone.parent do. So what this is saying is while the hitbox is parented to workspace hitboxes, we do. So test.wait. Another thing, test.wait. You can read it. Don't use wait because it's deprecated. So you can do test.wait. So while the hitbox is actually there, we can do the detection. So let's go ahead and let's see. Look at the documentation. So ROBLOX itself has sort of like a built-in hitbox sort of handler, right? So we can do world root, which is just the whole game or workspace. So we see something called get parts in part. Convenient, right? So we can say local parts found, or parts collected for me, I guess. In part. like that. And it puts all of your little parameters that you want. So we want to detect it in the hitbox clone. And we want params. Even if you have no idea what the overlap params are, this tells you. So we need to find what overlap params are. Local params equals overlap params.new. And you can read more about it in the documentation, but in this case we just say params.filterType exclude, and we want the hitbox not to detect anything that has to do with the character or the actual hitboxes in the workspace. So we want to ignore that, but we want to collect everything else. So we can say print parts collected. Oops, like that. Let's see. Yeah, I'll explain the other thing later. However, now you can see that, yep, it doesn't find anything yet. However, if I go up here to the dummy and I hit it, there's something in there. So you'll see that everything in here is sort of a child within the character or the target that we're hitting. So right arm, right leg, right, something like that. So you might be wondering, how do we exactly get the target, right? The actual model for the target. So in order to do that, we can say, first off, we can start a loop. So underscore comma parts. And part collects to do. So, I forgot to explain this. The this sort of method, right, returns a bunch of arrays. What arrays are is, let's make a certain right here. 1 test true false. Array 1, so like this. We can say, so array 1 corresponds to 1, array 2 corresponds to test, 3 true, 4 false. That's how that works. So if we know that, we can loop it like this. So underscore, the reason we do underscore is because we're not going to use the index for it. The index is essentially 1, 2, 3, and 4, but we're not going to worry about that. We're worrying about the values that are inside, which are these. So we can say if parts.parent, so these parts, so if the part has a parent and we can find a humanoid in the parent, then now we can make a new variable called local target. You can call this whatever you want. The thing you gotta understand about Roblox is it's very free. You can do whatever you want with it. So knowing this, we can just say local target hit, we can say local tung so or whatever you want. But let's say target hit equals part.parent, which is the model. And now we can say print target hit. So it's just going to print the template R6. There we go, like that. And you see there's a little pause between every M1, which is good. However, one thing that's going to be an issue is that the player is going to die immediately. So let me show you why. So first off, we want to get the humanoid, local target humanoid equals target hit dot humanoid. The reason we can do dot humanoid instead of FindFirstChild, WaitForChild is because we already know the humanoid is there from this. So we can do that, and then we can say target humanoid. Let's go over here to our documentation, and let's look at our humanoid. Go over here to methods, take damage right here. So you can conveniently make the character take damage, and of course everything, protection, shit like that. So we can say target humanoid take damage. You see that it doesn't autocomplete, so what we can do that is through annotating. So the 2 dots, and we can say that, okay, the target humanoid we know is a humanoid, so we can do that. Now it autocompletes like so. Let's say make it take like 5 damage, or yeah, 5 damage is fine. So if we play the game, and we hit, wait, let me make it actually show the health so we know. Viewer and health display always on, like so. So if we were to attack, you'll see that it dies right away, instantly, because there's no buffer between how many times you can hit the target within a certain amount of time. So to do that, we can make a new variable called local already hit. So we're going to check if it's already been hit. Now, we can say if already hits part.parent, then return, right? So the reason we can't use target hit down here is there's something called scoping, and also how ROBLOX reads their how the Lua compiler reads code that you write. Remember, it reads it from up to down, so every single line one by one. So we know this now, so we can't do target hit because it's just not defined yet. Even though we can see at face value it's there, it's just not defined. So we can say part.parent, or we can copy and paste this and move it down to where after you defined it, and we can say target hit, then return. So when we play the game, you'll see that there's going to be a big issue because it still dies instantly. That's because we didn't actually add the target to the table. So we can say already hit, target hit is equal to true. And that's going to add a buffer to it. So you can only hit the same character once within every hitbox. So if we walk up, we hit him, you see that he's being hit slowly and he's not being killed right away. Because for every hitbox instance, it resets already hit. So let's stop this. And that's pretty much it's pretty much episode 1 for this tutorial. A couple of takeaways that I want y'all to know is, 1, do not copy and paste. I don't care if you say you're not copying and pasting. Do never copy and paste. You need to understand what exactly you're doing, because that's the most important part. Copy and pasting, sure, you can get that away in like Naruto cards and shit like that. Not when you're actually making a game. It's crucial that you know that. Also, scoping, a big thing. ROBLOX reads things from top to bottom. Let me give you another example of scoping. Let's make a local function called test, right? And let's say local test variable equals fun. Scoping, everything, what scoping says is this is a new scope. So if we were to say print test variable outside of this function, it wouldn't work because the script doesn't recognize the variable as a part of the rest of these scope. So, however, if you go in here and you say print test variable, there's no underline because it recognizes that test variable is in fact a variable in the function. So that's also important. And let's see what else. Knowing, it's really important that you know how to use documentation. Even sometimes I use documentation just because I forget like what a method is or what it actually does. But just read, and you'll be able to understand way more and know how ROBLOX organization works and things like that. And that is pretty much it. Episode 2, I'll probably get into how to play animations and sort of mini ROBLOX tutorials, but this is it pretty much.